January 10th, 1475. The fog is so thick you could choke on it. Somewhere in the Barlad Valley, near a muddy town called Vaslui, 120,000 Ottoman soldiers are about to die in a trap they never see coming. Listen to what's moving through that fog. The thunder of 120,000 boots, the snorting of war horses draped in steel, the creak of cannon wheels dragged through frozen mud by teams of oxen. This is the army that conquered Constantinople, the army that made emperors kneel, the army that had never, not once, faced a Christian force it couldn't crush. Leading them is Suleiman Pasha. His orders come directly from Mem II, the conqueror himself. The mission is simple: erase Moldavia, kill its prince, add another province to the empire that stretches from the Danube to the Euphrates. But waiting in that fog, hidden at the valley's throat, stands a smaller force, 40,000 Moldavians. Many of them are peasants gripping axes and hunting bows. Their armor is patched. Their boots are worn. They haven't eaten well in weeks. Their leader sits astride a war horse, watching the fog swallow the Ottoman vanguard. He's not tall. He's not physically imposing. Old wounds have left him with a permanent limp. A musket ball is still lodged near his ankle from a siege years ago. His name is Stephen III of Moldavia, and in the next 6 hours, he's going to kill more Ottoman soldiers than any Christian commander in living memory. The trap springs. Cannons hidden in the hills open fire. Bugles scream from positions scattered through the forest. Fake positions, meant to make the Ottomans believe they're surrounded by an army 3 times Stephen's actual size. The mud, churned by winter rains and deliberately flooded by Stephen's engineers, swallows cavalry horses up to their chests. Riders drown in the muck. Formations collapse. Arrows fall like black rain from archers the Ottomans can't see. And then Stephen's cavalry charges. By dusk, 40,000 Ottoman soldiers are dead, for pashas have fallen. Suleiman barely escapes with his life. The banners of the Sultan, the sacred symbols of Ottoman invincibility, are captured, muddied, sent to Rome as trophies. When news reaches Istanbul, something unusual happens. Fear. Not anger. Not outrage. Fear. The Sultan who conquered Constantinople, who crushed empires, who commanded the most powerful military force on earth. That Sultan begins to understand something. The prince of this tiny principality, this speck of land between the Carpathians and the Black Sea, is not like the others. He's not like Vlad. Vlad. You know that name. Vlad the Impaler. Dracula. The prince who decorated roadsides with 20,000 rotting corpses on stakes. The monster who dipped his bread in the blood of his enemies. The boogeyman of the Balkans. Here's what you probably don't know. Vlad and Stephen were cousins. They grew up together in exile. They shared strategies. They learned from each other's father's murders. But the Ottomans feared Stephen more. Not because Stephen was crueler. He wasn't. Not because Stephen had a larger army. He didn't. Not because Stephen won more battles. That's debatable. The Ottomans feared Stephen more because they couldn't break him. Vlad could be crushed and was multiple times. He reigned for a total of 6 years across 3 separate attempts at holding power. He died in battle, possibly killed by his own men. His skull may have been sent to Istanbul as a trophy. Stephen? He ruled for 47 years. He fought 47 major battles and won all but 2. He died in his bed, an old man, giving final instructions to his son. And the nation he built? It survived Ottoman domination for centuries, with its culture intact, its churches standing, its identity unbroken. That's why the story matters. That's why the Ottomans whispered his name with a fear they never wasted on Dracula. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I find it genuinely fascinating that people across the world, from Bucharest to Boston, from Istanbul to Jakarta, are drawn to these stories from the past. History connects us in ways that borders never could. Let me know where you are. And if this story grips you, if you want to understand how a limping prince outfought the greatest empire on earth, hit that like button. Costs you nothing, but it helps this video reach others who crave real history over cheap myths. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because to understand why Stephen became unkillable, you need to understand the night that killed his childhood. October 1451. The village of Ryuzany sits quiet in the Moldavian hills. Tonight, though, it's alive with celebration. Torches blaze from every window of the great hall. Music spills into the autumn darkness. Fiddles and drums. The old songs that have echoed through these valleys for generations. Inside, tables groan under platters of roasted boar, fresh bread, wheels of cheese, flagons of wine that never seem to empty. It's a wedding feast, and the prince himself has come to honor the occasion. Bogdan II, Prince of Moldavia, sits at the head table. He's a warrior king in his prime, scarred from a dozen campaigns, respected by his soldiers, loved by his people. Beside him sits his son. Stephen is barely a teenager, thin, watchful, already showing signs of the sharp intelligence that will later terrify empires. But tonight, he's just a boy at a party, picking at his food, listening to the laughter of men who've had too much wine. The guards have relaxed. It's a celebration, after all. Spears lean against walls. Swords hang unbuckled. The prince is among friends. This is the mistake that kills him. The doors don't open. They explode inward. Armed men pour into the hall. At their head strides Petru Aaron, Bogdan's own brother, Stephen's uncle. His face is twisted with something beyond ambition. This is years of jealousy, years of feeling overlooked, years of wanting what his brother has. Behind him come mercenaries, men who kill for gold and don't ask questions. The next moments are chaos. Tables overturn. Wine splashes across the floor, mixing with something darker. Guests scream and scatter. Some try to fight. Most try to flee. Bogdan draws his sword. He's a warrior. He's faced death before. But he's surrounded by his own guards. Guards who aren't moving to help him. Some of them were bought. Others are simply frozen, caught between loyalty and survival. The prince fights anyway. He cuts down 2 attackers before they swarm him. Blades flash, blood sprays, and then it's over. Bogdan II, Prince of Moldavia, falls among the overturned benches. The last thing he sees is his brother standing over him. Then the sword falls. Across the hall, pressed against a wall, Stephen watches his father die. He's 13 years old, maybe 14. Historians argue about the exact date. What they don't argue about is what happens next. Stephen runs, not toward his father's body, not toward vengeance. He runs for the door, for the darkness, for survival. Because even at 13, he understands something that will define his entire life. Dead men don't get revenge. Dead men don't reclaim thrones. Dead men are just dead. He escapes into the night. Behind him, his father's head is being separated from his body. Everything Stephen knew is gone. His home, his inheritance, his safety, his childhood. He's a refugee now. a hunted boy in a land where his uncle has already sent riders to find him, to kill him, to make sure no rival claimant survives. But Stephen survives. He crosses into Transylvania, then into Wallachia. He sleeps in barns, in forests, in the homes of minor nobles who remember owing debts to his father. He learns to read faces, to sense danger, to trust no one completely. And eventually, fate delivers him to the one person who understands exactly what he's going through. His cousin Vlad. Vlad III is older than Stephen by several years. He's already developing the hard edges that history will remember. His eyes carry something cold, the residue of years spent as a hostage in Ottoman courts, learning Turkish, learning politics, learning that the world is a machine that grinds boys into men or into corpses. His father was murdered too. Vlad Dracula killed by Hungarian-backed boyars. Vlad's older brother was buried alive. The family that ruled Wallachia was butchered and scattered. So when Stephen arrives, hollow-eyed and hunted, Vlad recognizes him immediately. Not as a cousin, as a mirror. They spend years together in exile, plotting, planning, analyzing what went wrong for their fathers. The conversations in those dim castle halls would shape European history. Your father trusted family, Vlad says. Look what it cost him. Your father trusted nobles, Stephen replies. Same result. They dissect every failure. Bogdan relaxed his guard at a feast. Dracula relied on boyars who sold him out for Hungarian gold. Both men died because they believed in loyalty that didn't exist. The lessons crystallize. Trust no one. Not family. Not nobles. Not allies. Strike surgically. Don't posture. Don't threaten. Mercy is a luxury. Save it for when you're strong enough to afford the consequences. But here's where the cousins diverge. Vlad absorbs the trauma and lets it ignite into rage. He dreams of impaled enemies, of terror so absolute that no one will ever dare betray him. His revenge will be spectacular, theatrical, designed to make men vomit with fear. Stephen absorbs the same trauma and channels it into calculation. He dreams of fortresses, of armies bound by loyalty bought with land, of a state so tightly organized that no single traitor can bring it down. Same darkness, different architecture. Remember this difference. It explains everything that comes later. By 1456, Vlad makes his move. With Hungarian backing, he seizes the Wallachian throne. His first major act? A feast of his own, but he's the one springing the trap. He invites the boyar families who killed his father. Hundreds of them. And when the meal ends, his soldiers surround them. The old and weak are impaled on the spot. The young and strong are marched into the mountains and worked to death building Vlad's new fortress. This is the man history calls the Impaler. And this is the man who gives Stephen his chance. 1457. Vlad loans his cousin 6,000 Wallachian troops. It's time to go home. Stephen marches north into Moldavia. At Dalgesti, he meets Petru Aaron's forces, the army of the uncle who murdered his father. The battle is brutal. Steel on steel. Mud churned to red soup. Men screaming, horses falling. The chaos of medieval combat where you can barely tell friend from enemy. But Stephen has something Aaron doesn't. A cause. His soldiers aren't just fighting for pay. They're fighting for a prince who survived the impossible, who came back from the dead, who represents something other than the endless cycle of betrayal. Aaron's lines break. The usurper flees to Poland. He'll spend years trying to reclaim Moldavia, raising armies, launching invasions. He'll fail every time. because Stephen is done being a victim. In an open field, surrounded by soldiers still bloody from battle, Stephen III is crowned Prince of Moldavia. No grand cathedral, no golden ceremony, just iron resolve and the cheers of men who chose to follow him. He's 24 years old, and his real work is just beginning. The crown sits on Stephen's head, but the throne beneath him is made of knives. Moldavia's boyars, the great noble families who control the land, the wealth, the private armies, watch this new prince with cold eyes. They've seen princes come and go. They've learned that cooperation is optional. They stood aside while Bogdan was butchered. Some of them profited from the chaos. They expect Stephen to be manageable. A young man, traumatized, dependent on their support. Someone who can be controlled or, failing that, replaced. They are catastrophically wrong. Within months, Stephen moves against the families who failed his father. But he doesn't imitate Vlad's theatrical massacres. He doesn't impale hundreds at a feast. That would create martyrs, unite the survivors, give them a common enemy. Instead, he's surgical. A trial for treason here. An execution for conspiracy there. Estates seized for unpaid taxes. One by one, the most dangerous boyar families find themselves weakened, scattered, replaced. And in their place, something new. Stephen creates a class called the Vitaji, a word that means brave men. They come from peasant stock, from minor noble families, from soldiers who proved themselves in battle. Men with everything to gain and nothing to fall back on. The deal is simple. Land for loyalty. Fight for me and rise with me. Betray me and lose everything. This is revolutionary. In 1457, power across Europe flows through hereditary nobility. Kings depend on lords, lords control the land, peasants work the soil and die in the wars. Nobody asks the common man for loyalty. Nobody offers him a path upward. Stephen does. He builds a standing army of 40,000 men tied directly to him, not to boyar lords who might switch sides when the price is right. These soldiers aren't fighting for gold. They're fighting for their farms, their futures, their families. And he doesn't stop there. Suceava citadel becomes a fortress unlike anything Moldavia has seen. Walls thick enough to shrug off Ottoman cannons. Deep moats. Firing platforms designed for the new age of gunpowder. Stockpiles of grain that can feed a garrison for years. Weapons caches. Gold reserves. Spy networks spread outward to Buda, to Krakow, to Istanbul itself. Stephen knows what the Hungarian king eats for breakfast. He knows which Ottoman pashas are corrupt. He knows when armies are gathering before they've finished gathering. By the early 1460s, Moldavia has transformed from a revolving door principality into something new. A porcupine state. Small, yes. Poor compared to the great powers. But bristling with defenses, impossible to swallow without choking. Stephen has learned from his father's murder. No more relaxed guards. No more trusting family. No more depending on allies who might turn. He's building something that can survive without him. And he's about to need it. Because to the south, his cousin Vlad is about to poke the largest empire on earth. By 1462, Vlad has made himself impossible to ignore. He's stopped paying tribute to the Ottomans. He's launched raids across the Danube, burning towns, slaughtering garrisons. In one infamous night attack, he came within minutes of assassinating Sultan Mehmed II himself. And everywhere his army passes, the impaling stakes go up. 20,000 Ottoman prisoners, rotting in the sun, a forest of the dead. Mehmed is not amused. The conqueror of Constantinople gathers the largest army assembled since the fall of Rome. Over 100,000 soldiers, janissaries in their white turbans, slave soldiers trained from childhood for war, Sipahi cavalry armored in steel, cannons that can shatter walls from a mile away. This army marches north to erase Vlad from existence. And Stephen faces a choice. Honor says he should help. Vlad gave him troops when he needed them. Vlad is family. Vlad is fighting the same enemy. Christian princes should stand together against the Sultan. Strategy says something different. Stephen's spies have reported the size of Mehmed's army. They've calculated the odds. They've watched Vlad's reckless provocations and seen where this road leads. Vlad cannot win. If Stephen commits his forces to Wallachia, he'll lose them in another prince's doomed war. Moldavia will be defenseless. Everything he's built will burn. So Stephen makes a different calculation. There's a fortress called Chilia, sitting at the mouth of the Danube where the river meets the Black Sea. It controls trade routes worth fortunes. It's currently held jointly by Wallachians and Hungarians, a strategic prize that could make Moldavia economically independent. While Mehmed's army chases Vlad through the burning Wallachian countryside, Stephen besieges Chilia. 8 days of bombardment. Stephen personally leads assaults against the walls. During one attack, a musket ball tears through his ankle. The wound is severe. It never fully heals. For the rest of his life, he'll walk with a limp, a permanent reminder of what this betrayal cost him. Chilia falls. Moldavia gains its port. Stephen secures his nation's economic future. And Vlad? Vlad flees north toward Hungary, expecting refuge from King Matthias Corvinus. Instead, Matthias arrests him, throws him in prison, forges letters proving Vlad was secretly negotiating with the Ottomans. The Impaler spends the next 12 years in a Hungarian dungeon. Mehmed installs Radu the Handsome, Vlad's own brother, as Prince of Wallachia. Radu had been an Ottoman hostage, raised in the Sultan's court. Some historians suggest he was Mehmed's lover. Now he's Mehmed's puppet. Wallachia becomes an Ottoman vassal, and Moldavia stands alone. Stephen watches all of this from Suceava. His ankle throbs. His conscience, if he has one, is silent. He's betrayed his cousin. He's shattered their alliance. He's taken advantage of Vlad's destruction for his own gain. But Moldavia survives. Years later, when people ask about Vlad, Stephen reportedly says nothing. The silence speaks. Some choices have no clean answers. Save your family, lose your nation. Save your nation, lose your soul. Stephen made his choice. He lived with it for 47 years. And now the full weight of that choice is about to arrive at his borders. Because Mehmed isn't finished. Constantinople is conquered. Wallachia is subdued. Only one Christian prince in the region still refuses to kneel. Moldavia is next. Stephen stops paying tribute. It's 1473, and the message is unmistakable. No more gold flowing south. No more diplomatic niceties. No more pretending Moldavia is anything but hostile. In Istanbul, Mehmed receives the news. The Sultan who conquered Constantinople, who broke the Byzantine Empire, who commands an army that has never been defeated in open battle. This Sultan stares at a map and considers a speck of land between the Carpathians and the Black Sea. A minor principality. A prince with 40,000 soldiers. Mehmed commands millions. The response should be simple. In 1474, Suleiman Pasha receives his orders. Take 120,000 men. March north. Destroy Moldavia. Kill Stephen. Add another province to the eternal empire. Suleiman is no fool. He's a veteran commander, careful, experienced. He knows the terrain will be difficult. He knows winter is coming. He plans accordingly. But he doesn't understand what he's walking into. Stephen has no intention of meeting this army in open battle. He doesn't have to. He has something better. He has time. He has space. He has winter. As Suleiman's massive force crosses into Moldavia, they find nothing. Villages stand empty. Every scrap of food has been carried away or burned. Wells are poisoned. Livestock slaughtered and left to rot where they can't be eaten. And the attacks begin. Small forces, a few hundred men, strike at night. They kill sentries, burn supply wagons, and vanish into forests that seem to swallow them whole. Ottoman patrols sent to chase them disappear. Scouts ride out and never return. The great army begins to bleed. Not in battle. Not gloriously. They bleed from 1,000 small cuts. A strangled picket here. A raided baggage train there. Food that was supposed to last weeks runs out in days. And still they march deeper into Moldavia, chasing a prince who won't stand and fight. January arrives. The snow falls. The mud freezes, then thaws, then freezes again. Horses die. Men die. Disease spreads through the camps. Suleiman presses on. He has his orders. The Sultan's reputation is at stake. And then, in the valley near Vaslui, he finally finds Stephen's army. If you understand this next battle, you'll understand why the Ottomans learned to fear this man more than any other enemy they faced in the 15th century. Because Stephen isn't just going to fight Suleiman. He's going to humiliate him. January 10th, 1475. Before dawn. The Barlad Valley is wrapped in fog so thick it turns the world into a gray soup. You can't see 20 feet in any direction. Sound travels strangely, muffled, distorted, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Suleiman Pasha knows Stephen's army is nearby. His scouts have reported positions. But the fog makes everything uncertain. Still, he has 120,000 men. Stephen has perhaps 40,000, many of them peasants with hunting bows. The math is simple. He orders the advance. The valley narrows as the Ottoman army moves forward. There's a bridge, a high wooden structure spanning a swollen river. The troops funnel across, unit after unit, losing formation as the terrain compresses them. This is exactly what Stephen has been waiting for. Cannons hidden on the surrounding hills open fire. The Ottoman soldiers can't see where the shots are coming from. They can't see how many guns there are. They can only hear the roar, feel the earth shake, watch their comrades fall. And then the bugles start. Horns sound from the forest, north, south, east, west. Different positions, different signals. To the Ottomans, it sounds like an enormous army is surrounding them, closing in from every direction. It's a trick. Stephen has positioned small units with horns throughout the woods, creating the illusion of forces he doesn't have. But the Ottoman soldiers don't know that. They can't see through the fog. All they know is that the hills are exploding, the forests are screaming, and they're trapped in a valley that's rapidly becoming a killing ground. Panic spreads. The mud, deliberately flooded by Stephen's engineers over the previous weeks, has thawed into a churning swamp. Cavalry horses sink to their chests and thrash helplessly. Riders drown in the muck. Infantry formations collapse as men stumble into sinkholes. And now the arrows come. Stephen's Moldavian archers have trained for this their entire lives. They hunt in these forests. They know how to shoot through fog, aiming at sound, at movement, at the screaming mass of confused soldiers below. The arrows fall in waves. Thousands of them. You can't see them coming. You just hear the whistle, then the thud, then the screaming. When the Ottoman lines are thoroughly shattered, Stephen gives the final order. The Moldavian cavalry charges. They don't charge blindly. They charge at the points where Ottoman formations have collapsed, where officers are dead, where soldiers are already fleeing. They carve through the chaos like knives through rotten fruit. By mid-afternoon, the battle is decided. By dusk, it's a massacre. 40,000 Ottoman soldiers lie dead in the valley. For pashas have fallen. Suleiman Pasha barely escapes with a remnant of his force. Stephen's soldiers spend the next week collecting trophies. Ottoman banners, weapons, the elaborate tents of the command staff, mountains of equipment abandoned in the flight. The captured banners are sent to Rome, to Venice, to Hungary. Stephen writes letters to every Christian monarch in Europe, explaining what he's accomplished. Pope Sixtus IV reads the reports and gives Stephen a title, Athlete of Christ. But Stephen knows the truth. In his letter to the Pope, he writes something remarkable. We have cut off the right hand of the heathen. But this is only the beginning. The Sultan will come himself. Christian Europe must unite, or we will all fall separately. He's asking for help, for reinforcements, for a united Christendom to stand against the Ottoman tide. The Christian monarchs send letters of congratulation. They do not send soldiers, and Stephen's warning proves prophetic. The Sultan is coming. Mem too doesn't delegate this time. The conqueror himself marches north with 150,000 soldiers, the largest army to invade Moldavia in history. And this time there's a second front. The Crimean Tatars, Ottoman vassals, attack from the east with tens of thousands of horsemen. They sweep through Moldavian villages, burning, killing, capturing slaves. Stephen's peasant soldiers face an impossible choice. Their farms are burning. Their families are being dragged away in chains. How can they stand in formation when everything they love is being destroyed behind them? They can't. For the first time, Stephen's army begins to melt away. Not through cowardice, through impossible circumstances. The Vitaiji who swore loyalty for land watch that land go up in smoke. By the time Stephen makes his stand at Valia Alba, the White Valley, he has perhaps 10,000 men remaining. Against 150,000. He knows he can't win, but he has to fight anyway. If he flees without a battle, his reputation collapses. His remaining supporters abandon him. His nation dies not with a roar but with a whimper. So he fights. He sets entire forests ablaze to slow the Ottoman advance. The smoke rises for miles. But Mem's army simply waits for the fires to die, then continues. The battle, when it comes, is less a fight than an execution. Stephen's men hold for hours. They hold because their prince is there with them, limping on his wounded ankle, sword in hand. They hold because they've won before and believe they can win again. But 10,000 cannot stop 150,000. The lines buckle, then break, then dissolve entirely. Stephen is nearly killed. His personal guard dies around him, buying seconds for their prince to escape. He flees into the forests, wounded again, with only a handful of survivors. Behind him, the White Valley earns its name. The field turns red. Then, as the bodies are left to rot, eventually white with bones. For years afterward, travelers report that the valley is carpeted with skulls. Stephen has lost everything. His army, his reputation, his confidence. He rides north toward his last refuge. Neamt Citadel, a fortress built into the mountainside, theoretically impregnable. He is defeated, broken, ready to surrender, and then his mother speaks. Neamt citadel rises from the Carpathian foothills like a stone fist raised against heaven. Its walls are thick. Its position is unassailable. Inside, Stephen's mother Altia waits. Whether the story that follows is literal truth or patriotic legend, historians still debate. But the effect is documented. Stephen arrives at the gates, his army reduced to a few hundred survivors, his body wounded, his spirit crushed. He's ready to flee into Poland, to negotiate terms, to accept whatever humiliation Mem demands. Altia appears on the ramparts. According to the chroniclers, she refuses to open the gates. "I gave birth to a victor," she calls down, "not to a coward. Return to your army. Fight or die, but do not shame me with surrender." Stephen stares up at his mother. Every instinct says to run. He's outnumbered 15-1. His soldiers are dead. His country is burning. Reason demands capitulation, but something else stirs. He thinks about his father, murdered at a feast because he trusted too easily. He thinks about Vlad, rotting in a Hungarian prison because he fought too recklessly. He thinks about the boyars who betrayed, the cousins who schemed, the empires that devoured. And he thinks about what he's built. The Vitaiji system still exists. The fortresses still stand. The spy networks still function. The organism of the Moldavian state is wounded, but alive. If he surrenders now, it dies forever. If he fights, even impossibly, it might survive. Stephen turns his horse around. He begins to rebuild. Not his army, there's no time for that, but his strategy. Guerrilla raids resume. Small bands of survivors strike at Ottoman supply lines, then vanish. The same tactics that bled Suleiman's army begin bleeding Mem's. And nature itself turns against the conqueror. Disease spreads through the Ottoman camps. Dysentery, fever. The foul water of Moldavian swamps carries death more efficiently than any arrow. Food runs short. The scorched earth policy Stephen ordered months ago has left nothing to forage. Ottoman soldiers begin to starve. Mehmed reaches the walls of Suceava, Stephen's capital, but he can't take it. The fortress Stephen built holds. The cannons he stockpiled fire back. The defenders he trained stand firm. Weeks pass, then months. The greatest army in the world is slowly dying. Not from battle, from attrition, from disease, from hunger, from 1,000 small cuts that never stop bleeding. Finally, Mehmed orders the retreat. He leaves behind tens of thousands of dead. He leaves behind his reputation as an unstoppable conqueror. He leaves behind the certain knowledge that this small, poor, stubborn principality cannot be conquered by force alone. Stephen has lost the battle. He's won the war, not through victory, but through survival. This is why the Ottomans feared him. Vlad impaled people. Vlad terrorized. Vlad made grand, horrifying gestures that burned bright and fast. But you could kill Vlad. You could wait him out. You could catch him in a mistake. Stephen couldn't be killed. Couldn't be waited out. Didn't make mistakes that mattered. When you struck him down, he rose again. When you burned his land, he retreated to his fortresses. When you thought you'd won, you found yourself dying in a swamp far from home, wondering why you ever came north. The Ottomans would return to Moldavia. Again and again over the following decades. They would win battles. They would burn towns. They would never conquer Stephen. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. What comes next is the moment Stephen proves his genius extends beyond just surviving the Ottomans. 20 years after Valia Alba, Stephen is an old man by medieval standards. His ankle still aches from that siege decades ago. His body carries scars from 47 major battles. But his mind is sharp as ever. In 1497, a new threat emerges from an unexpected direction. John Albert, King of Poland, announces a crusade against the Ottomans. He gathers a massive army, 60,000 men, the flower of Polish nobility. He promises glory, plunder, victory. But his true target isn't the Ottomans. It's Moldavia. John Albert's brother wants Stephen's throne. The crusade is a cover story, a pretext for invasion. Polish troops march south, toward Suceava, with conquest on their minds. Stephen sees through it immediately. His spy networks have been tracking Polish movements for months. He knows exactly what's coming. He doesn't panic. He prepares. The Polish army arrives at Suceava expecting a quick siege, a quick victory. Instead, they find a fortress that shrugs off their assaults like a bear ignoring mosquitoes. Weeks pass. Casualties mount. Disease spreads through the Polish camp. John Albert realizes he's made a terrible mistake. He negotiates a truce. Stephen agrees, on terms that let the Polish army retreat through the Kosmin forest, a dense woodland where the roads are narrow and the trees grow thick. After the impalement fields, Mehmed didn't want to merely defeat Vlad. He wanted to exterminate him. The full weight of the Ottoman Empire crashed down on Wallachia with a fury reserved for those who cross lines. Vlad's reign lasted 6 years, scattered across 3 separate attempts at power. He died in battle, possibly killed by his own men, around 1476. His head may have been sent to Istanbul as a trophy. His terror tactics didn't save him. They guaranteed that every enemy he faced would fight to the death. Stephen chose differently. He fortified. He organized. He created systems that could function without him. He made betrayal structurally difficult. He burned his own land to starve invaders, then rebuilt. He lost battles and survived. He won battles and remained humble. He ruled for 47 years. He died in his bed. His nation survived him by centuries. The difference isn't courage. Both men were brave. The difference is sustainability. Vlad was a fire, brilliant, terrifying, quickly extinguished. Stephen was a stone wall, unglamorous, unbreakable, still standing after the fire burns out. Mem too reportedly called Stephen the most dangerous Christian alive. Not the most frightening, not the most theatrical, the most dangerous. Because you could defeat Stephen in battle and still lose the war. You could burn his land and find him in his fortresses. You could kill his army and find him raising another. You could think you'd won and discover your soldiers dying of disease in swamps, your supply lines bleeding from raids, your treasury emptied by a campaign that never ended. Stephen couldn't be solved. He could only be outlasted, and he outlasted everyone. That's why the Ottomans feared him. Not for what he did to his enemies, for what he did to their empire. Made it spend blood and treasure for 47 years, with nothing to show but exhaustion. Look at a map of modern Romania. The borders that exist today, the lines that separate Romania from Ukraine, from Moldova, from Hungary, trace paths that Stephen helped draw. His monasteries still stand. 44 stone witnesses to 47 battles. The painted frescoes still tell his stories. Tourists photograph walls designed to teach illiterate peasants the history of their own resistance. His military innovations, the Vitagi system, the fortress networks, the scorched earth tactics, became templates for later Romanian resistance. When the Ottomans finally withdrew from the region centuries later, they left behind a population with an identity, a culture, a memory of independence. That's not true everywhere they conquered. Stephen understood something that Vlad didn't. Victory isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about preserving what you're fighting for. Vlad became a Halloween costume, a horror movie villain, a metaphor for tyranny and bloodlust. Stephen became a saint. The Romanian Orthodox Church canonized him in 1992. His image appears on currency. Schools bear his name. His tomb at Putna remains a pilgrimage site. One cousin became a monster remembered with shuddering fascination. The other became the father of a nation. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you one more question. What would you sacrifice to ensure your people's survival? Stephen sacrificed his cousin, his peace of mind, his body. That ankle wound never stopped hurting. He sacrificed the chance to be loved as a kind ruler, because kindness to traitors would have destroyed his state. He burned his own land to deny it to invaders. He executed nobles who might have been reformed. He made choices that no moral philosopher could fully justify. And because he made those choices, millions of people across 5 centuries got to exist, to speak Romanian, to practice their faith, to call themselves a nation. Was it worth it? That's not for me to answer. It's for you to decide. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Like it if it made you think. Subscribe if you want more history that challenges easy answers. And leave a comment. Where are you watching from? And what did Stephen's story teach you? The fog over Vaslui has lifted. 500 years have passed. The bones of 40,000 Ottoman soldiers have long since returned to the earth. But something remains. A small country on the edge of Europe that shouldn't exist. A Latin language surrounded by Slavic tongues. An Orthodox faith that survived centuries of pressure. An identity that refused to die. Stephen the Great didn't just win battles. He built a future. The Ottomans feared him because they couldn't kill him. And they couldn't kill him because he was willing to sacrifice everything. His comfort, his family, his conscience, to endure. Dracula became a legend because of how he killed. Stephen became immortal because of what he saved. And that is why the Ottoman Empire feared Stephen the Great far more than Dracula himself.